So, what if your eternal destiny wasn't set in stone? What if you actually had a genuine choice in the matter? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today with Arminianism, a theological idea that really champions free will and has, kind of quietly, shaped a huge part of modern Christianity.
You know, this is a question that has puzzled people for centuries. Are we just actors in some pre-written divine play? Are our lines and our final curtain call already decided for us? Or do we actually hold the pen? Do we have the power to help write our own story? Arminianism offers a really compelling answer to this age-old debate.
So where did this whole revolutionary idea even come from? Well, it all started with a Dutch theologian back in the late 16th century. He took a long, hard look at the dominant religious ideas of his time and decided, you know what, something here doesn't quite add up.
And this is the man himself, Jacobus Arminius. Now, here's the crazy part. He was actually a student of Theodore Beza, who was John Calvin's own hand-picked successor. But Arminius, through his own study of the scriptures, came to a totally different conclusion. He just couldn't get on board with the idea that God preselects some people for salvation, no strings attached. Instead, he proposed that God's election is for believers, which means it depends on a person's faith. And let me tell you, this was a radical, game-changing way of thinking.
As you can probably guess, this idea caused a massive uproar. In 1608, Arminius officially laid out his views. After he died, his followers, who were called the Remonstrants, they laid out their core beliefs. The backlash was swift and it was severe. A powerful council called the Synod of Dort condemned the teaching as straight-up heresy, and its followers were persecuted. But the idea just refused to die. And then, get this, just 12 years later, it was granted official protection as a religion in Holland. What a journey, right? From heresy to an accepted faith in just over a decade.
So what were these controversial beliefs that caused all that fuss? Let's break down the 3 core pillars of Arminian thought so we can really get what they were saying. Okay, first up, there's this idea of prevenient grace. Now, Arminians totally agree with Calvinists that, because of our fallen nature, we can't choose God on our own. But here's the huge difference. Arminians believe God gives everyone a measure of grace that kind of restores their free will, just enough for them to be able to say yes or no to his offer of salvation. So it's not about us saving ourselves, it's about God making the first move for everybody, which then enables us to freely respond. And that leads directly to the second pillar, conditional election. See, if people are truly free to choose, then God's decision about who to save isn't some unconditional choice made before time began. Instead, God, being all-knowing, sees ahead of time who will freely choose to put their faith in him. So God elects to save those whom he knows will believe. His choice is conditional on our foreseen faith. And third, we have resistible grace, which, if you think about it, is the logical conclusion of the first 2 ideas. If God gives us a genuine choice, then his offer of salvation has to be something we can actually resist. The grace that leads to salvation isn't some unstoppable force that's only applied to a select few. No, it's a universal invitation that can be freely accepted or freely rejected. So these 3 pillars, they really set the stage for one of the most significant and long-lasting debates in all of Protestant theology, the big showdown between Arminianism and its powerful counterpart, Calvinism. This chart really lays out the key differences pretty clearly. So for election, on one hand, Arminianism says it's conditional on our faith. On the other, Calvinism says it's God's unconditional choice, period. For grace, Arminians see it as universal and resistible, while Calvinists see it as specifically for the elect and totally irresistible. The atonement, what Christ's death actually accomplished, is for all people in the Arminian view, but it's limited only to the elect in the Calvinist view. And finally, perseverance. This is basically the question. Can a believer lose their salvation? Arminians say it's conditional on continuing in faith, while Calvinists say, nope, it's unconditionally guaranteed.
But despite all that early controversy, Arminian ideas didn't just survive, they spread like wildfire. And that's thanks in large part to one of the most influential figures in church history who picked up the torch more than a century later.
And that figure was John Wesley. In the 18th century, Wesley, the founder of the whole Methodist movement, he fully embraced Arminian theology. He became its most passionate and organized champion, even launching a magazine called, get this, The Arminian, just to explain and popularize these ideas. It really gave the movement a powerful new voice for a whole new era.
But Wesley didn't just copy and paste Arminius. He added his own unique spin. His most famous contribution was this idea of Christian perfection. Now, hold on. This isn't about becoming literally sinless. It's more like reaching a state of spiritual maturity where your life is just so defined by a deep, practical love for God and for other people that it becomes your second nature.
And the impact of this Wesleyan legacy is, well, it's staggering. Today, Arminian theology is the bedrock for hundreds of millions of Christians all over the world. It's the theological engine behind massive denominations like the Methodists, a lot of Baptist groups, most Pentecostal churches, the Holiness Movement, the Salvation Army, and even the Seventh-day Adventists. It's huge.
Which brings us to a really fascinating question. How did a set of ideas that was once condemned as heresy become one of the most popular theological viewpoints in the entire world? Why does this message of a salvation that's available to everyone, and a real choice in the matter, why does that resonate so deeply with so many people?
Ultimately, the debate that Arminius sparked over 400 years ago is still very much alive today. It forces us to grapple with one of the most profound questions of faith. When it comes to salvation, how do we balance God's ultimate authority with our own human responsibility? Where do you think that balance lies?